When you look back at childhood friendships, some of them feel like the roots of your life. They run deep, steady, and unshakable. They aren't just memories of shared toys, schoolyard secrets, or summer evenings. They become part of your identity. For many people, these bonds fade over time. But for some, they remain constant, like a quiet promise that no matter what life throws your way, you'll always have that one person beside you. That's exactly how it was for two girls, Sarah and Nadia. They met when they were only 7 years old, in a small school tucked away in a busy neighborhood. Sarah was bright, curious, and imaginative, while Nadia was more outspoken, ambitious, and always at the center of attention. From the very beginning, their differences balanced each other. Sarah admired Nadia's boldness, and Nadia found comfort in Sarah's steady loyalty. Over time, they became inseparable. Every school project, every sports day, every personal struggle, they shared it. When Sarah's parents went through a rough patch in their marriage, it was Nadia who snuck over with snacks and funny stories to distract her. And when Nadia lost her grandmother, it was Sarah who stayed the night, quietly holding her hand until she fell asleep. Everyone who knew them joked that they weren't just friends, they were practically sisters. But here's the thing about childhood friendships. They grow as you grow. And sometimes, one person starts carrying more weight than the other. That shift is so subtle at first that you don't even notice it. But looking back, Sarah would eventually realize that she had been carrying Nadia's dreams more than her own. In high school, Nadia always wanted to be noticed, on stage, in debates, in extracurricular clubs. She thrived on the spotlight, but she also had a habit of overcommitting and getting overwhelmed. Sarah, who was quieter but dependable, was always there to pick up the pieces. If Nadia forgot her lines for a play, Sarah stayed up all night helping her rehearse. If Nadia left a project half done, Sarah finished it for her. At first, it didn't feel like a sacrifice. Sarah loved helping her best friend succeed. She told herself, this is what friends do. But small sacrifices turned into bigger ones. When it came time to apply for colleges, Sarah had dreams of pursuing art and design. She had the talent and the passion. But Nadia had set her sights on business school, and she wanted Sarah to come along, to be her roommate, to keep her grounded. Sarah hesitated. Her heart pulled toward creativity. But in the end, she gave in. She told herself she could always return to her passion later. So she followed Nadia into business school, setting aside her own dreams for the comfort of their friendship. Those years were a mixture of closeness and quiet compromise. Nadia flourished in networking, making friends quickly, charming professors. Sarah excelled in the background, handling the detailed work on group projects, staying up late to polish presentations, making sure Nadia's ambitions didn't collapse under their own weight. Again, Sarah didn't resent it, at least not openly. She believed she was investing in both of their futures. That loyalty would come full circle one day. After graduation, Nadia married into a family with strong business connections. Her charm and ambition blended easily into that world. While Sarah, she drifted into a supporting role once again, Nadia often asked her to help with small business ventures, side projects, even managing paperwork. Sarah obliged, thinking that someday they might build something meaningful together. Years passed this way. Sarah was single, living modestly, and Nadia had children, a household, and a growing network of influence. But through it all, Sarah's devotion never wavered. She babysat Nadia's children when emergencies came up. She stayed late to help her with reports. She even loaned her money once, when one of Nadia's projects ran short on funds. Sarah kept telling herself, friendship is about being there, no matter what. But beneath that loyalty was a dream that never fully went away. Sarah had always wanted to create something of her own, something that reflected her ideas, her creativity, her hard work. After years of helping Nadia, she began drafting a plan for a small boutique business that combined modern design with traditional craftsmanship. It was personal to her, a way of finally stepping into her own identity. For months she worked quietly, putting her thoughts on paper, creating samples, building connections. She even shared some of her ideas with Nadia, not because she needed approval, but because Nadia was her oldest friend. She trusted her. She believed Nadia would be happy for her. but that trust turned into the deepest wound of her life. One evening, during a casual dinner at Nadia's house, Sarah mentioned she was close to finalizing her proposal and was thinking of approaching investors. Nadia smiled, offered encouragement, and asked a few pointed questions. Sarah thought nothing of it. To her, it was just another conversation between sisters. But weeks later, she discovered something she never imagined. Through a mutual acquaintance, Sarah learned that Nadia had taken her idea, almost word for word, and presented it as her own to her husband's business circle. Not only that, but Nadia's version was already being pushed forward with significant investment. Sarah was stunned. At first, she didn't want to believe it. She thought there must be some misunderstanding. But when she confronted Nadia gently, Nadia brushed it off with practiced ease. She laughed, saying, "Oh, come on. Ideas aren't anyone's property. Besides, you know you don't have the resources to make it happen. I'm just helping both of us by bringing it to life." Those words cut deeper than any knife. For years, Sarah had sacrificed her own ambitions to help Nadia. She had given her loyalty, her time, her energy, even her money. And now, when it was finally her turn to shine, Nadia had stolen the very dream that defined her. But betrayal rarely comes alone. Around the same time, whispers began circulating in their circle of friends and acquaintances. Sarah was painted as someone who couldn't handle responsibility, who was too dependent on others. Nadia, with her usual charm, hinted at these things subtly, always with a concerned tone, as if she was just worried about her friend. The damage was quiet but effective. People began distancing themselves from Sarah, believing she was unreliable, maybe even jealous of Nadia's success. It was like losing two things at once: the dream she had carefully built in secret, and the reputation she had spent years maintaining. For a while, Sarah was crushed. She withdrew, replaying the years of sacrifice in her mind, wondering if she had been foolish all along. Her apartment felt smaller, her days heavier. She cried, but always in private. Outwardly, she remained calm, too proud to show her pain to the world. This was the turning point. Because in those long, quiet nights, Sarah realized something profound. True betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people you trust most, the ones you've carried on your back for years. And while anger was tempting, she knew exploding would only prove Nadia's lies. Instead, she decided on something far stronger: silence, patience, and a quiet determination to rise again. She didn't scream. She didn't confront Nadia in public. She didn't beg anyone to believe her side of the story. She understood that real revenge, the kind that restores dignity, isn't about shouting louder than your betrayer. It's about standing tall, building yourself piece by piece, until your success itself exposes the truth. And so, with her heart scarred but her will sharpened, Sarah began the slow process of reclaiming her life. The weeks after Sarah's realization were heavy but strangely clear. For the first time in years, she stopped running after someone else's schedule. She no longer answered Nadia's casual demands, no longer rushed to be available at a moment's notice. Instead, she sat in her small apartment, with her notebook spread across the table, reviewing every page she had once written with hope. The sting of betrayal was still raw, but as she read through her ideas, she realized something important. They were hers. Nadia might have stolen the concept, but the heart behind it, the vision, the style, the meaning, that still belonged to Sarah. She told herself that silence would be her shield, and patience would be her weapon. She had no intention of stooping to Nadia's level by exposing her in a fit of anger. People who had already been swayed by Nadia's charm would not suddenly switch sides. If she wanted to reclaim her dignity, she had to prove herself with actions, not accusations. So she began quietly, carefully. Her first step was to reclaim her confidence. For too long, she had let herself be overshadowed, telling herself she was the helper and not the leader. But deep inside, she had knowledge, skills, and creativity. She started by attending workshops, online courses, and local gatherings for small entrepreneurs. She didn't speak much at first, just listened, took notes, and absorbed the atmosphere. But little by little, she began to ask questions, to introduce herself, to share small glimpses of her ideas. And unlike Nadia's world, where charm and status often outweighed substance, these new circles were different. Here, people respected originality and authenticity. Sarah's quiet sincerity stood out. Of course, building from scratch was not easy. She had limited savings and no strong connections. But she had something Nadia didn't: a deep understanding of her craft, born from years of genuine passion. Sarah began working late into the night, sketching designs, creating samples by hand, and even selling a few pieces online under a simple name that carried no hint of her identity. It wasn't glamorous. Some nights she wondered if she was being foolish. But she kept going, reminding herself that real growth takes time. Meanwhile, she watched Nadia's version of her idea grow rapidly. With investors and a polished launch, Nadia's boutique brand appeared in glossy magazines and social media campaigns. She hosted events, posted photos with influencers, and received compliments from acquaintances who didn't know the real story. It hurt to see her dream paraded around like that, but instead of letting bitterness consume her, Sarah used it as fuel. She studied every move Nadia made, noting where the focus was on appearance rather than substance. She saw flaws, corners cut, designs that looked good in photos but lacked quality in person. Sarah knew it was only a matter of time before cracks began to show. Still, she didn't sit back passively. She worked. She found a small community of local artisans, people who had been overlooked in the rush of fast fashion and mass production. They were skilled but underpaid, struggling to keep their crafts alive. Sarah connected with them, learning their techniques, respecting their traditions, and slowly building partnerships. This became the foundation of her work. Her brand, though tiny, was rooted in authenticity and care. Every item had a story. Every design carried meaning. Word began to spread, not through flashy ads, but through whispers of satisfaction. A customer told a friend who told another. Orders trickled in, small but steady. Sarah delivered each one with a handwritten note, thanking them sincerely. People felt the difference. It wasn't just a product. It was personal, genuine, crafted with heart. During this time, Sarah also rebuilt herself emotionally. She joined a small book club, reconnected with an old cousin she had lost touch with, and even started journaling daily. These little acts reminded her that her identity was bigger than her friendship with Nadia. For so long, she had defined herself by her role in someone else's story. Now she was writing her own. But Nadia was not blind. She noticed Sarah's quiet distance, and eventually, she heard whispers about Sarah's growing presence in the artisan community. At first, she dismissed it with a laugh. To her, Sarah had always been the helper, not the leader. She believed that without big investors and flashy marketing, Sarah could never pose a threat. But insecurity has a way of surfacing, even in the confident. Nadia began subtly asking mutual friends what Sarah was up to, probing for details. And then came the gossip, delivered with the same smile Nadia always wore. She told people Sarah was trying to copy her business out of jealousy. She framed Sarah as bitter, desperate, and petty. The irony of it all would have been almost laughable, if not for the pain it caused. Some believed Nadia, of course, but others, especially those who had worked directly with Sarah or bought from her, began to doubt Nadia's narrative. They saw the quality of Sarah's work, the sincerity in her approach. It didn't match the image Nadia tried to paint. This contrast grew sharper over time. Nadia's brand, though successful on the surface, began receiving quiet complaints. Customers noticed delays in delivery, inconsistencies in quality, and a lack of genuine connection. Meanwhile, Sarah's small brand gained loyal supporters. People who bought once often returned, bringing others with them. Her growth was not explosive, but it was steady, built on trust. Still, Sarah didn't rush. She knew that revenge wasn't about beating Nadia overnight. It was about patience, about allowing truth to reveal itself naturally. She kept her focus on her work, refusing to get entangled in petty disputes. When asked directly about Nadia, she never spoke harshly. She simply smiled and said, "Everyone has their own path." That calm dignity only made people respect her more. Behind the scenes, Sarah was preparing for something bigger. She had learned from her earlier mistake of sharing too much. This time she kept her plans close to her chest. With the help of the artisans she worked with, she developed a unique collection that blended modern aesthetics with traditional techniques. It was something no investor-driven brand could replicate easily, because it wasn't just about products. It was about relationships, trust, and authenticity. As months turned into years, Sarah's small brand began to attract attention from places she hadn't expected. A local journalist wrote an article about her collaboration with artisans, highlighting her role in preserving cultural heritage. A blogger praised her designs as thoughtful and timeless. Slowly, her name began to circulate, not in loud headlines, but in genuine admiration. And all this time, Sarah remained silent about the betrayal. Not once did she call Nadia out publicly. She didn't need to. Those who looked closely could see the difference. One brand built on charm and shortcuts, the other built on patience and substance. The contrast was beginning to speak louder than any accusation could. Of course, Sarah wasn't immune to doubt. There were nights she lay awake wondering if she was strong enough, if her slow progress could ever catch up to Nadia's flashy success. But then she would remember the simple truth she had come to embrace. Loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness. She had been loyal once, to a fault. Now she was loyal to herself, to her values, her dreams, her dignity. This shift changed everything. Even in the way she carried herself, people noticed the difference. She was no longer the quiet shadow of her friend. She had become someone who radiated quiet confidence. Not loud, not boastful, just steady, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. And this was only the beginning. Because the real moment of revelation, the calm but undeniable revenge, was still ahead. Time has a way of balancing things, though it doesn't always happen quickly. For Sarah, the years that followed were a test of patience and persistence. She worked quietly, steadily, almost invisibly compared to Nadia's shining stage presence. To many outsiders, Nadia was still the successful one, glamorous, well-connected, always smiling in photographs at events. Sarah, in contrast, seemed ordinary, going about her life without fanfare. But beneath the surface, the foundation of Nadia's world was beginning to crack. And Sarah, who had chosen silence and restraint, was now in a position to watch, not with bitterness, but with an almost serene awareness that the truth always reveals itself in time. It began with Nadia's business. Investors, drawn at first to her charisma and promises, had grown impatient. They wanted results, steady profits, consistent quality, a reputation that lasted beyond the first splash of publicity. But Nadia's brand, built on borrowed ideas and superficial charm, struggled to maintain substance. Deadlines were missed, designs lacked originality, and customers quietly slipped away after disappointing experiences. Sarah heard these things not from gossip, but from observation. Sometimes new customers would come to her small studio after leaving Nadia's boutique, complaining softly about how they felt underwhelmed or overcharged. They didn't always mention Nadia by name, but Sarah knew. She never indulged the complaints. Instead, she simply listened, thanked them, and offered something better. Slowly, her reputation grew, not as a competitor, but as an alternative, a place where customers felt valued. At the same time, her collaborations with artisans deepened. She didn't just hire them. She worked alongside them, learning their stories, respecting their methods, and building trust. Word spread in artisan communities that Sarah was different from others. She didn't exploit, she empowered. This gave her access to unique skills and techniques that Nadia's brand could never replicate. The turning point came when Sarah was invited to participate in a cultural exhibition organized by a respected nonprofit. The event celebrated artisanship and sustainable design, showcasing small brands that prioritized authenticity over profit. Sarah's collection, modest but thoughtful, stood out. A well-known journalist covering the event interviewed her, captivated not just by the products but by the calm, steady passion with which she spoke. The article that followed was not flashy, but it was sincere. It told Sarah's story, not the betrayal, not the stolen idea, but the journey of a woman who built something meaningful by staying true to her values. Readers resonated with it. Orders increased. Social media buzzed, not with staged glamour, but with genuine admiration. And then, the inevitable happened. People began to notice the striking similarities between Sarah's work and Nadia's brand. Customers, investors, even acquaintances started asking quiet questions. Didn't Sarah talk about these ideas years ago? Why does her work feel more original than Nadia's? The whispers that once painted Sarah as jealous now shifted. Nadia's charm, once her greatest weapon, began to lose its power under scrutiny. Nadia, of course, noticed. She confronted Sarah one afternoon, unannounced, appearing at her studio with the same polished smile she had worn all her life. "You know," she said, her tone sweet but edged with irritation, "people are starting to think you're competing with me. I thought we were friends. Why are you trying to outshine me?" Sarah, calm as ever, looked at her without anger. "I'm not competing with you, Nadia. I'm just living my own life, finally." Her voice was steady, almost gentle. "You have your path. I have mine." That calmness infuriated Nadia more than any accusation would have. Because deep down, she knew Sarah was no longer under her shadow. She was no longer dependent, no longer silent out of fear or loyalty. She had reclaimed herself. The unraveling accelerated from there. Nadia's investors pulled back after a disappointing quarterly review. Some of her key staff left, citing mismanagement. Customers, tired of shallow promises, drifted toward more genuine alternatives, including Sarah's growing brand. The lies Nadia had once whispered about Sarah lost their weight, as people saw with their own eyes who truly had substance. But Sarah never gloated. She never once said, "I told you so." She didn't need to. Her dignity lay in her restraint. The very act of rising without attacking was the revenge. She had built a life where Nadia's betrayal no longer defined her. Instead, it had propelled her toward her true potential. One evening, at a community event celebrating local entrepreneurs, Sarah was invited as a speaker. Standing before a modest crowd, she shared her journey, not as a tale of betrayal, but as one of patience, resilience, and the importance of staying true to oneself. She spoke about loyalty, about how sometimes it can be mistaken for weakness. But in reality, true loyalty, especially to yourself, is strength. Among the audience were people who had once believed Nadia's lies. As they listened, many realized the truth without Sarah ever naming names. That was the beauty of her calm revenge. She didn't need to expose Nadia directly. By simply being herself, by succeeding quietly and authentically, she had revealed the truth far more powerfully than any confrontation could. As the applause faded that night, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. The years of sacrifice, the pain of betrayal, the long nights of doubt, they had all led to this moment. Not a victory parade, not a dramatic showdown, but a quiet restoration of dignity. She had shown that loyalty, patience, and authenticity could outlast betrayal and deceit. Nadia's world, meanwhile, continued to crumble. Without investors, without trust, her brand shrank. She still put on a smile at social gatherings, but people saw through it now. Where once she had been admired, now she was pitied. And the one person who could have publicly destroyed her reputation, Sarah, chose silence. That silence was the sharpest revenge of all. For Sarah, life moved forward. Her brand grew steadily, attracting not just customers but supporters who believed in her vision. She found joy in her work, in the relationships she had built, and in the knowledge that she had stayed true to herself. For the first time in her life, she was no longer living as someone's helper or shadow. She was living as herself, fully and freely. In the end, Sarah didn't just reclaim her dream. She reclaimed her dignity, her voice, her place in the world. And she did it without anger, without cruelty, without lowering herself to the level of those who betrayed her. She showed that calm revenge is not about destruction. It's about building yourself so strongly that the truth becomes undeniable. So, what's the lesson here? That loyalty should never be mistaken for weakness. That patience can be a far sharper weapon than rage. And that the best revenge is not in tearing others down, but in rising so steadily, so authentically, that no one can ever take away your worth again. And with that, my friend, we come to the end of Sarah's story. A story of loyalty, betrayal, and the quiet strength of calm revenge. If you found meaning in this journey, I invite you to share this story with others, leave a like, and subscribe to My Calm Revenge for more stories like this. Stories that remind us that dignity, patience, and truth always win in the end.